So because of the fact we had our neighborhood association already in place, and kind of even while we were still evacuated in Houston and Baton Rouge and everywhere else after the storm, we started doing conference calls. And within like 5 days after the storm, we had our first conference call to say, okay, where is everybody? Have you heard anything? You know, this is at the time when people were still coming by in boats to see what was going on in the neighborhood. So we did our first conference call. So we actually began our planning within 5 days of being away from New Orleans. So it was at that point that we knew we were in trouble. And I had a computer with me, and immediately started getting in touch with people where I had their email addresses and saying, where are you? You know, did you see what's happened? And then it became worse and worse when all the levees started breaking around the city, not just ours. That's when we, within 2 days, had scheduled our first conference call, but gave it a couple of days so people had kind of calmed down to start our planning process.
And this would be the 10 people on
the board. That's right. Yeah. And at that point, we started figuring out, you know, one of the first things we did was say, okay, this will take some time, but we need to get in touch with the people as best as we can. And the best way to do that is to see if we have people that any one of us knows, and then they know, that are in every block in Lakeview. So we actually, this didn't happen overnight, but it took about 6 months, but we created a block captain network, which is where through everybody knowing somebody in Lakeview, we got somebody to volunteer to be the information gatherer for a particular block. And by doing that, we started our whole surveying process. So we knew that to come back as a neighborhood, we couldn't just sit there and have us, you know, figure out all this stuff. We had to get everybody's input, and we needed to know what they were going to do. So the idea was, if we can get a block captain who knows the people in their block, that through just, you know, personal communication, they'll be able to figure out where are they going to come back, have they made up their mind what they're going to do with their homes. Now this is, I've skipped about 6 months in that interim, but that really was a process we talked about initially.
So you sort of took the map and said, this block, this block, this block, the whole Lakeview.
And who
do we know on that block?
That's right. And I'm not sure if any other association did that, but that was the benefit of having a neighborhood association before time that was organized. We hadn't done anything like that before that time, but we knew enough people through that board, which is composed of a lot of people that had lived here for a long time, that we could kind of start from that group of 10 and then branch out to eventually get literally every block in Lakeview covered. And that was done within 6 to 9 months. We had that process well underway, and by doing that, we were able to start our whole planning process. Because, you know, the first 6 to 9 months is just kind of getting over the trauma and figuring out where are we, you know, have you even thought about what you're going to do? How bad is the situation? Because, you know, when the homes first flooded, we didn't know if our homes were ever going to be inhabitable. Because, you know, you're saying, did it get washed off the pilings? You know, is it structurally sound? And it took, you know, months and months of, you know, people looking at their own situations to figure out whether that would ever be able to come back to what was there. And we were concerned too that, you know, were they going to let us come back? Because, you know, after having that much water, we didn't know if we had contamination, we didn't know if we had environmental issues, we didn't know if they would say that area flooded so badly that you can't build back that area. But as part of that planning process, that's when the city started off with their very first plan, which was the Bring Back New Orleans Commission. And I was still in Houston, many of us were still dispersed, and the mayor wanted that process to get going real fast. And it got us concerned because we said, wait a minute, you know, we haven't gone through enough yet to really start figuring out what's going to happen. So he, for better or for worse, thought it was very important to keep that going, and got a lot of the people who were not from our neighborhood involved in this process. That's when the Urban Land Institute came in, and a lot of other people that came in and said these areas that were so badly flooded need to be green space, and that we need to, you know, populate the sliver by the river and all of this. When we heard that, that was our call to arms. We were starting our plan of how we were going to come back, and when we saw the map that showed a green dot on Lakeview that said we couldn't come back, we said, like hell, We're going to come back.
That said that?
That was the Bring Back New Orleans Commission.
The Urban Land Institute?
The Urban Land Institute in particular, and I'm not decrying that because, you know, they did something that was very logical, but logic is not necessarily the right answer in rebuilding a city.
And were they, I'm just wondering, were they outside consultants?
Absolutely. Yeah,
so they were not really from
No,
here?
no, none of them were from here.
No.
And they just didn't understand that. And, you know, as an observer from outside, I don't disagree with their findings, but you can't, you know, what are you going to do with a city of 1 million people? You can't just all say, oh, you know, 800,000 of you have to move, because that is just not practical, because the only way you can do that is for the government to buy you out, because these people, you know, their whole life was their property. So unless you have an alternative for them, that is not going to work. And it's like, that's what my initial reaction was, is like, okay, so what is our alternative? You know, we can build back safer, we can understand the risk we've got, but to say we can't build back in a neighborhood which we had loved, and, you know, that was our livelihood and that was our life savings. So that's when it became pretty clear that that concept was not going to work. And that's when they went through the second phase of planning, which was the Lambert Plan, which again...
Would that first phase have been right around the...
January, February, after the storm.
Okay.
Because I'll never forget that Sunday paper that came out that showed the map that had the green dots on it. That was in mid-January. And it was at that point that we said, okay, we've got to get involved and we've got to take control of this ourselves. And that was really, like I said, the call to arms to Lakeview that said, we will prove our viability because we know this neighborhood can come back, and that we're not going to let outside consultants tell us what to do.